Awesome. And we are live. Hello and welcome to today's webinar where we're going to be talking AI, data science, and all things related within the scope of CMOs and trying to demystify a set of, I think, very, very loaded terms today in the industry. And while we give people a bit of time to join us, I wanted to, of course, thank and welcome our awesome guest today. So Paul, Roetzer from the Marketing AI Institute. So maybe like a quick intro about yourself. I would love to hear what led you to start the Marketing AI Institute.
Yeah, thanks for having me, France. Appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation. The background for me getting into AI is probably a little different than the average person in AI today, which is I was a liberal arts major and a journalism school grad. And I started my own marketing agency back in 2005, which, as I was telling you offline, we became HubSpot's first partner agency back in 2007. And then actually the origin of what today is a partner program that has, 5,000 partners around the world. So what happened then is in 07, we basically were at the forefront of the marketing automation movement. And what, at that time they coined inbound marketing. And so we were paying really close attention to everything that was happening in the technology space and really the evolution of social media and blogging, consumer generated content, and all the things that emerged around that time. And that relationship led to me writing my first book, The Marketing Agency Blueprint, in 2011. And as I was writing that, working on the manuscript, just prior is when IBM Watson won on Jeopardy. So if people remember, that kind of inflection point for AI, where this machine was able to predict answers on Jeopardy, beat the two world champions, Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter. And after I finished the manuscript for my book, I remember thinking, what is that? Like, how does that technology work? And there was one specific business challenge I had in my mind, which was, if you're a business and you want to spend $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million on marketing, how do you do it? And so I basically set out to try and figure out, like, what is this AI technology, and could it help me build smarter marketing strategies? Could it help me allocate budgets, allocate resources, predict performance, determine what the best way to generate 500 leads would be? And so I just went on this path of discovery, and I started reading every book you could find on the topic. No, there was nothing about marketing at the time. I mean, it's like in 2014, HubSpot IPO'd, not a single machine learning engineer. ExactTarget sells to Salesforce for $2.5 billion, no machine learning engineers on staff. Like 2014, 15, 16, AI is on the fringe of marketing and sales. It's not really part of the conversation yet. And we have this massive explosion of MarTech companies, and nobody's building smart tech. Like, there's no real intelligence built into these things. And so we just started researching it, and I launched the Marketing AI Institute as a blog. It was just like, me and one other guy at the agency are like, let's just start researching and telling the story of AI, figure out what it is, how it can be used. And along the way, if enough people subscribe, maybe we'll turn it into a business. And that's eventually what we ended up doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a really cool story. And I think there's definitely a lot of need for people like you who can help educate people towards what AI is, how to think about it. And I think there's what I really appreciate about the Institute also is that it's a very vendor agnostic thought leadership. So this is something that I think for a lot of CMOs out there, or even marketing practitioners, is pretty hard, because a lot of the AI you get pitched is within the context of a product, and it tends to get very dogmatic. And sometimes it's hard to pull back a little bit and understand, like, what are the concepts, and like, why should we even care about AI? And that's actually like the first topic that we'll cover today. But ultimately today, the goal is really to go over kind of why you should care about AI. What are some elements to think about before you bring in AI, and what are some of the foundational elements you need to have in your tech stack? And at the end, we'll talk more precisely on how to actually get started. And so for those who don't know me, I'm the co-founder here at MadKudu, and we're a no-code data studio for marketers. And I've actually spent the past 15 years working in building predictive like machine learning models for marketers. It was actually first in the B2C space, and then it was MadKudu kind of started in the B2B area. So this is a topic that is dear to my heart, and I've seen many CMOs kind of struggle with the topic and struggle to actually transform it into great ideas, from great ideas into something concrete. So jumping right into it, I think Paul is going to cover a little bit about how, as a CMO, really you should think about, AI, like why should you care about it, and, how to break it down into, what it actually means in a more, I guess, like marketing terminology rather than like big terms that are supposed to scare you away.
Yeah, and that's we love to have this slide because, as you're saying, it's a very abstract topic, and I get it. I mean, we've profiled about 150 vendors. I've spoken probably over 120 conferences, on the topic of AI. Met with thousands of marketers. We've done research with Drift. We teamed up with Drift and did a state of the industry report. Like, we get that marketers think about this topic and it's abstract, it's overwhelming, it's just another digital transformation thing they have to worry about. And so a lot of times there's this lack of urgency to figure out the topic because it's hard to grasp. And what we try and do at the Institute is say it's actually not that abstract. And by the time you get done with this 30 minutes, like I promise you're going to understand it at this macro level that you can take action on. But one of the key ways to do that is to start making it very tangible to people. And so you can do that by talking about categories or specific areas of marketing where it can be applied. So you can see here this 2018 report from McKinsey Global Institute, where they try and estimate the financial impact annually of AI on different areas of marketing. Now, if you're a CMO, every one of these probably affects you. You probably have budget allocated, you're building strategy or developing teams around different areas that are shown here. But the whole point of this is the annual impact is in the trillions. And an example is like pricing and promotion. So if you're an airline and you can predict what price to show an individual based on a bunch of behavioral triggers or intent signals, that this person is willing to pay $9 more than this person because they've looked at the page 6 times, or they're on their loyalty program, whatever all these signals are. And that's the kind of thing MadKudu would get involved in. It's like, how do you predict likelihood to purchase? That can then be carried into dynamic pricing, which can unlock millions of dollars in profits for a single airline if you do it right. You can apply that to any kind of membership business or consumer business where dynamic pricing can play a role. Think about Uber and that whole economy around ride sharing. Same with Airbnb. Like, all of these places, pricing isn't static. And so that one example, you can start to see how businesses can unlock all kinds of value. And then you go across these other 6 buckets and you start to see at a very high level, it has the potential to do it. So the question then becomes, okay, fine, trillions of dollars, like what actually is it? So Francis, if you want to jump to the next slide, my favorite definition of artificial intelligence is from Demis Hassabis. And if you're not familiar with Demis, his company DeepMind was acquired by Google in 2014 for about $650 million. Demis is, in my opinion, going to end up being one of the most important people of our generation. He's working on very hard problems around AI and its application to really important things like climate change and energy efficiency, medical research. They just came out with the AlphaFold, where they can predict the folding of proteins, which can be applied to development of medicine. They're doing insanely cool stuff. But in this Rolling Stone article years ago, when someone said, well, what is AI? He just said it's the science of making machines smart. Like, machines are dumb. When we say machines, we mean like hardware and software. They don't know how to do anything that someone hasn't coded them to do. So you have software developers that write rules that tell the software what it's capable of doing. And then you have the marketer who comes in and writes rules that tells it what to do. So if I have email software, a developer gives the email software capabilities, and then I go in and build lists and write emails and send emails and do all these things. It doesn't get smarter in that instance. It's just a piece of software. But what he's saying is we can give these machines, we can give the software more intelligence, where it gets better, it learns, it evolves, it makes you better at your job. And that's the base premise, is it kind of gives us this ability to predict things at scale, and it gives us the ability for those predictions to keep getting better. And then it gives us the ability to have human-like abilities like language generation and computer vision. And so that's kind of like, at a very broad level, what he's saying is these things can get smarter if we give them the right ability to develop intelligence. And then on the next slide, we just sort of borrowed that line of thinking and said, so marketing artificial intelligence is really just the science of making marketing smart. So if I'm going to buy a CRM system or an email management system or social media management, or I'm going to do ad spend, or I'm going to develop ad creative, or I'm going to do a content strategy, if I'm going to do any of these things that we do every day as marketers, what we're saying is there's smarter technology that can help you do those things more efficiently. They can make you better. They can give you the ability to predict outcomes and performance better, and they can create a much better user experience to your prospects and customers if you use technology that realistically you're using in your everyday life, when you let Gmail complete your sentences, or Netflix predict your shows, or Spotify predict your music. Like, AI is everywhere in our consumer lives. But as marketers and as business leaders, we're just not proactively seeking out that kind of smarter tech to bring into B2B and B2C environments. And then at a very high level, when you think about all these things, there's a very simple way we're going to talk about in a few minutes about how to apply this. It's just this idea that it can take these data-driven, repetitive tasks and you can intelligently automate them. So rather than your team spending 10 hours figuring out what post to write, writing the post, figuring out what audience to target it at, figuring out what keywords to do, like, these are all repetitive things you do every time you create a new article. The machine, the AI, can do pieces of that for you. And that's really the key, is finding these repetitive things, these tactical things that the machines can be trained to do as good or better than humans at a superhuman scale.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to think about it also that way, in kind of an evolution, right? Where I think there is a bit of a mythology around AI, of like this kind of Terminator, like sentient AI that can figure everything out. But like at the end of the day, and I think it's really critical today to be very pragmatic about your approach to AI, and realizing AI is I almost talk about it as the next level beyond automation, right? Like, there are things that you do that don't scale because you're trying to learn, right? So you do those things, and then you realize, oh, actually I can, you start figuring out, okay, I have this kind of workbook of, if I want to do this, these are the keywords I research. How do I research the importance of that keyword? Well, this is like the kind of stuff that I use. And then you realize you have like a pretty good framework of how to do this. It's fairly repetitive. It's not something where creativity is going to have a 10x leverage. And that's where you can automate it. And then the next level on that is like actually using AI to automate beyond either things that you've done, or just do even more. I think that's an element that it reduces costs, and it drastically increases leverage, right? Because the idea is that you want to make sure the human brain is used for what it is the most powerful, which is creativity. I think in marketing, we tend to get kind of brought down to like a lot of like tactical things and a lot of operational elements. And that's where like AI can actually take care of a lot of that baseline, so that we can focus our marketing brains to what we do best, which is really like designing experiences and thinking about experiences to run, and things to learn what makes a relevant customer journey. And to that extent, one concept I wanted to introduce, which I find a lot of people kind of struggle with this, because there's something in that hasn't been fully figured out yet in the world of AI, and that's really our interaction design, right? If you think of a lot of the reticence that there is to adopting something like the autopilot in Tesla, there's this fear that we're not ready to let the AI take all the decisions for us. And if you think about it, we haven't fully determined how do we represent one AI versus another. And so there's a lot of effort that's been put into define taxonomies, and one of the like semantic tools that is out there that I really like is this idea that there's different types of AI personalities. And based on what you're trying to solve, you will want to use one personality versus another. And so there's this concept of having a police AI, and the idea of a police AI is an AI that's going to enforce decisions based on whatever it's optimizing for, and it might go against your intuition, against your intentions, but that's what's predicted to generate the highest outcome. And the opposite of that is kind of the buddy AI, where it's more about helping you and assisting you in making the right decisions. So it's not going to make the decisions for you, but it's going to help you make the right one. And what I think is really interesting is if we take, in B2B, for example, the concept of lead scoring, it's very interesting to see that the same kind of product to some extent can be viewed very differently on both sides of the sales and marketing alignment, right? Marketers view lead scoring as a police. They want to say, these are the leads that are good, they should go to sales. These are the leads that are bad, they should not. But on the sales side, they don't necessarily feel like an AI is going to know better than them. What they are looking for is more of a buddy AI, something that's going to give them a competitive edge, something that's going to tell them, hey, if you go talk to this person, you're more likely to make your quota or to attain your quota. And if you don't talk to this person, you're getting more time in your day. And so why thinking about this personality is so critical is that ultimately, no matter how good your models or whatever you do as machine learning is, if it's not adopted, it's worthless. Like at the end of the day, like adoption is what's going to drive success of any AI initiative. And figuring out what kind of personality the end user is looking for is critical to make sure you're going to get adoption. I do believe that one of the reasons why a lot of the predictive scoring technology that came out, like 10-ish years ago failed was because it didn't understand that the two sides of the go-to-market team were actually looking for a different type of personality, and sales was more likely to adopt something that was trying to help them. And I think Salesforce has done a really good job at understanding that. And when you look at the Einstein recommendations, it's really a buddy AI. It's this little tooltip in Salesforce saying, hey, you haven't looked at this opportunity. Hey, this lead might warrant a little bit of time. That's really helpful, and that's going to be adopted by sales. It's a very sales-centric AI personality, which is closer to the buddy. And on the flip side, marketing is more about like, we need to make the right decisions, and I want to make sure that the good leads are worked by sales, and I want this like to be precise, and I want the machine to know better than I do what my ideal customer profile is, what makes a likely to buy customer, and push that to sales. And just understanding that and figuring out how you position it within the company, how you roll it out to the organization is critical to maximize adoption. So it's a small thing, but it is critical to driving adoption within the organization.
And one thing I'd add, Francis, like I think it calls out a really important point, especially for leadership that might be on this session. The technology you choose isn't necessarily even as important as the way you roll it out and educate your team, for the exact reason you just laid that out. I have seen lead scoring models get thrown aside in the first week of implementation because it was presented to sales as, this is it, like just pick the highest lead scores and go, and that the machine knows better than you know, basically. Like, this is the definitive score, use it. Versus what you just said, which is, you're still the expert, you're still the human. The score is meant to help you better filter the opportunities and give you some probabilities that otherwise you might not have seen. So it's not meant, and so when you're rolling out these like use case by use case within an organization and trying to do marketing in a smarter way with smarter tech, it's very important that people have an understanding of what the AI is capable of and what it's not capable of, and how it's actually meant to be there to help them versus replace them. And too many marketers can't explain that. Like what I just said in 30 seconds, they can't explain that to their own teams. And so you have a lot of pilot projects with AI faltering simply because of lack of proper communication, not because the tech doesn't have the ability to do what it says it can do.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of the vendors out there aren't fully aware of this, right? This is like, it's a very, very young field that hasn't fully matured yet. And I haven't seen that many companies out there that actually position rolling out AI within an organization through the lens of, what are people expecting to get out of this, and therefore how should you position it, and understanding you should position it differently based on who you're talking to. I mean, it does require a lot of work, but it's the only way to drive. I mean, change management is hard, right? And it has to hit the spot. And so jumping into a bit of the, like, I think one of the foundational elements to, rolling out AI within an organization is data. And something that I've been, talking more about lately, and I think it's a fairly controversial topic to some extent, but my strong belief, having seen, marketing organizations evolve over the past 10 years from not really being data literate to having, being submerged by vast amounts of data, is that I believe today CMOs need to own a data strategy. I'm not saying they need to own the data strategy of the company, but they need to own a data strategy that will allow them to hit their objectives and to hit their goals, and to make sure that their team can execute on whatever they want to. And implicitly, what that means is that you cannot simply rely on your CIO and CTOs to put that data strategy together for you. They generally don't understand the requirements of building a go-to-market strategy the way you do. Like, they're going to optimize for security, dependability, reliability, and where you're optimizing for velocity of iteration, being able to get access to data quickly to run segmentation and run tests. And these competing elements generally lead to a lot of friction internally, and I think to companies not being able to execute fast enough. And we all know today, if you're not executing fast enough, I mean, you're becoming a dinosaur as the days go by. And there was this comment that someone made recently that I thought was spot on, right? And a lot of people talk about how, like, data is the new gold, or we hear data is the new oil, whatever. And what I find is data is a gold mine, but ultimately data today is the new problem. And I really mean problem, because the amounts of data we're generating have become crippling to a lot of organizations. And the actual gold out of the data mine is the actionable insights, right? So being able to extract value from all this data is really what people are struggling with. And there are many reasons why they might be struggling with that. I think if we look on the, at least on the B2B side, there's kind of a new way of going to market, which is this kind of product-led growth motion, which generates a lot of user data. And that user data is really hard to go and look into. But even on the regular demand gen side, there's a lot of information about how your channels are performing, how many visits you're driving. All of that data is great, but it's generally put in vanity dashboards that show like trends going up. The real hard work there is figuring out, why are the trends going up, or why are they not going up as hard as, strongly as we would want. And that's where extracting these insights is really the challenge that we have today. And I think there's a couple of companies that have emerged from this as becoming, almost like data native, and like the value of the company is almost their ability to extract actionable insights from the data. On the B2C side, if we think about Facebook and Google, what they have changed is that the true value of these companies is their ability to extract actionable insights. Who should I show ads to, ultimately, based on these vast amounts of data of, like, what pages are you looking at, how you're interacting with people. And I think this is something that is here to stay. We've gone from, we are now in a digital world, and people expect customer journeys to be personalized. So, like, being able to personalize the journey based on the data is critical, and being able to understand your user data is fundamental in being able to be on brand and to run relevant campaigns, and therefore to not be outpaced by the competition.
One real practical example where you're seeing AI starting to creep in here is if you go into your Google Analytics dashboard, you can look at any data you want, and your visualizations and spreadsheets and everything, but they have an insights tool that's trying to find patterns, trying to find anomalies in your data, whether it's landing page conversions or a drop in page views, things that it thinks might be important to you. And then it asks you, was this helpful? Yes or no. So two things are happening. One, the AI is trying to surface anomalies or patterns. to machine learning, it's asking you, the human, did this help you? Was this a usable nugget of information? Because then the machine learns to continue to surface things like that to you. There's no human at Google sitting there sending you 5 insights for your portal. It's the machine finding things like that, that actionable insights out of a wealth of data.
Yeah. And I think like the implication here is this is a continuation of the evolution of the I'm saying B2B because I think on the B2C side it's maybe a bit earlier usually, but on the B2B CMO role, I think there's a big change where we've moved from the like 1960s like Mad Men era where it was like brand first and it was like these amazing ads and like that was the core of marketing. Then in the 2000s we came very focused on demand gen. It was like a brand new world, and we're all trying to figure out how do we optimize channels, what are the channels that work well. I think now we're entering this new era, which is kind of a data / operations era where CMOs have to figure out how to enable both of these other core components to the marketing strategy based on data, right? There was this amazing marketing campaign that was run by Segment, which is a B2B CDP in the Bay in San Francisco. So they were running this ad on the Highway 101 where it was this big thing that was saying, "Good morning, LA." And then it said in a subtitle, "What good is bad data?" And the whole idea about this is that, sure, you're trying, like, personalization is table stakes. Everyone should be doing personalization. But if you do personalization based on the wrong data, that is very, very detrimental to your brand and it's going to destroy your brand. So it's like, I think it's a funny take on that. And I think it goes to show how data is so important. And then how beyond data, like the analysis of what, is going to be relevant to show in the ad to personalize is critical. And then on the demand gen side, there's definitely a need for AI where we are at the point where channels have been oversaturated. There's a bunch of very sophisticated demand gen professionals out there that are able to, optimize spend on each of the channels, like figure out their marketing mix there. And now what's really going to give someone an edge is how granularly and precisely can they segment the world out there to figure out, like, push the right campaign through the right channel with the right offer to the right people. And that is all based off of data that needs to be operationalized for the demand gen team to use. So ultimately, these three components of marketing work together. And it's not like we've moved to a point where CMOs shouldn't care about brand. It's rather that they now have these three responsibilities, and the marketing strategy needs to include a data component to it to actually support these other big components. Otherwise, it's just going to fail, unfortunately. And maybe one, and I'll go quickly over this, but this is something that I want to bring awareness to. There's a new trend that I've seen out there, which is the adoption of the modern data stack. And the modern data stack is really coming around the realization that Snowflake or the data warehouse is the new CRM. That's the new source of truth for any customer data. I think, unfortunately for them, Salesforce has lost that battle. Adobe has lost that battle. Nowadays, people consider that the customer source of truth, or the customer data platform, if you will, is going to be Snowflake. You just dump all the data in there. That's where it lives. And then we have to figure out ways to push it back to the different production apps, like your HubSpot, your Salesforce, all that stuff. The challenge that people run into is that this modern data stack was designed by engineers for engineers. And so as a marketer, you kind of struggle to get access to the Snowflake data to propagate back into Salesforce. And so this, again, is, I think, very, very relevant for any company out there that's, going to have a PLG motion where you have a ton of user data that generally sits in Snowflake, and you still want to be able to segment in Salesforce to figure out who your reps should go after, but that's impossible. But beyond PLG, I'm seeing this as a general trend that is just growing, and we're seeing the adoption of, the data warehouse as the core source of truth being more and more dominant in the space. And it's a trend that's here to stay, I believe. So I think it's really important that as a CMO, or even as this practitioner in marketing, you educate yourself towards what this means for you and how you think about making sure, data comes available to your different production tools. And one quick story I wanted to share about this is, so this is the CMO of Twilio, François Dufour, and he was sharing this story about how at Twilio he realized that there was a ton of opportunity to be found from users in the product, but those product users were not making it to Salesforce because there's like too much data, so it lived in a data warehouse in the background, and he wanted to figure out how to do this. And so what he did is he asked for data scientists. He didn't really at the time understand that he needed a data strategy, so it was more, okay, I need this information, who knows how to do this? Engineering. So let's go and ask engineering to help us. Engineering didn't have any open headcounts at the time, so they said, sorry, no can do. There's no open recs for us to provide data scientists for this. So he actually brought this up to the board of directors at Twilio, and the board approved 2 additional headcounts for engineering to hire data scientists to help with this initiative of mining the user data to figure out who were potential enterprise accounts that were today using the product in a self-serve manner. The sad part of this is that it actually took 8 months for these 2 data scientists, post hiring them, to actually build something together. They shipped the first version of this segmentation of the user base. And of course, once they did that, the VP of engineering reallocated these 2 data scientists to work on the product because that's what they're paid for, building the product. And so while this was helpful in proving that there was some potential in doing this, once he had the first segmentation built, he couldn't do any iterations over it. And he had to go back to, round 0 because there was nothing he could iterate on. The engineers were reallocated to building the product. And so what he came to realize is that depending on engineering and not having a data strategy where you incorporate in your budget, in your plan, the ability to mine this data and look for insights in there is going to be detrimental to his success as a CMO, because then his team cannot do what they should be doing, which is finding pipeline opportunity within the existing data without going through engineering, but engineering has something better to do, and that's building the product. And so if you don't own this data strategy, you end up dependent on a team that has, conflicting interests, and it's very often just going to be detrimental to the success of the initiatives that are dependent on data. And so that's why figuring out how you can, plug in AI on top of like this data foundation can help you have these capabilities internally. I'm not going to go over this one, but this is like an example of a flow that was built by one of our customers before bringing in MadKudu. And like all of these tools are like, the whole purpose of this is to extract some behavioral aggregations into Marketo. And the sad part is that you cannot make any changes. Like a marketer cannot go into DBT or into Redshift or Workato, maybe Workato, but DBT and Redshift, probably not, to go make changes. And again, it just slows down your velocity of iteration. And you might show initial success with this, but then you realize that any iteration is going to be incredibly painful. I mean, it's like pulling teeth, right? To get engineers to be allocated to marketing initiatives. And the last kind of culprit that I see here, and why you need a data strategy, is that a lot of people compensate lack of strategy with abundance of tools. And I think that is a gigantic problem. It is something that a lot of AI vendors are responsible for, because they pitch you this panacea of like, oh, just like buy this tool and it's going to work. Unfortunately, if you don't have a strategy behind it, you're just going to create more data silos. If you're going to have like one AI tool that's going to be great at doing ABM, one AI tool that's going to be great at doing, let's say, website optimization. But if your website optimization doesn't talk to your ABM nor to your, let's say, like product-led tools, you have a gigantic problem, right? Where you're going to create very dislocated experiences that are fully suboptimal. And ultimately, you're just, spending a ton of money for something that doesn't work, rather than figuring out, how do I have a, central source of information that provides that information to my ABM initiatives, to my website optimization, to my PLG strategies, and how do these initiatives actually feed back into the machine so that we can do the best marketing out there. So like, that's one of the things that I will caution CMOs about, is don't just buy tech for the sake of buying it. Really think about building a data strategy of, what are the capabilities, what are the like the people, process, and product that you need to support that strategy, and make sure that you're not building silos for each part of the marketing initiatives. And yeah, this is here to stay. One of the things I like to look at is the hype cycles that Gartner likes to put together, and I do think we're we're on the slope of enlightenment when it comes to data infrastructure and thinking of data strategy to support AI initiatives. And if we look at kind of what happened over time to understand why we're here, I think Netflix to some extent was an eye opener. People realized, oh my God, we can use data to personalize the customer experience, and it actually works. It generates a ton of revenue. So it kind of opened the eyes of marketers towards the fact that data can be, can give you a competitive edge and can be a very helpful tool. I think then we had the, peak inflated expectations where we kind of thought that, oh, we're just going to bring in AI and all our problems are going to be solved. And that's where I think, to some extent, IBM Watson, Salesforce, Einstein, like hyped a lot, and I think disappointed a lot of people. There was this whole thing where like Watson was said to have cured cancer. It wasn't really the case. They actually like figured out how to understand stuff in papers, but I think it just like created this expectation where as marketers, we were not necessarily fully educated towards the capabilities of AIs, and we kind of expected this thing to solve everything. And I think that led us to big disenchantment and to the, I think, trough of disillusion where we kind of, to some extent, gave up and went back to like very engineering tools where it was like way more basic and just like building simple aggregations and like simple automation. And I think now we're at the point where we realize, okay, AI is the next step post automation, and it's automation in a very smart way to solve very specific problems that I have, and like was very strongly typed AI. And I think that's what's going to lead us to the plateau of productivity, because we now understand that we have to go for usage specific AI, figure out how to drive the adoption, and not hope that there's this one tool that is going to solve everything that we need to be solved on the marketing landscape. And so with that being said, there's a couple elements we want to go into of like how to actually precisely get started with implementing AI in your stack. The first thing I will say before handing this back over to Paul is you're not Google. And this might come as a shocker, but I see a lot of companies out there overthink what they're doing or try to go too big and like think they need AI all the time. So maybe this like the first thing I will say, you might not need AI for everything, right? Like if you haven't reached a point where dumb automation is starting to break because it's too dumb, then you don't need AI. Start with dumb automation, like find something that works, dumbly automate it. Then once you get to the point where there's too many nuances or you need too many rules, that's when AI is actually going to come into play and be super helpful. And I see too many companies kind of like start talking about like, oh, we need deep learning and we need this and we need that. And you're like, wait, but all you need right now is a if-then rule. Maybe start with the if-then rule. And then if there are like too many steps in your if-then, start adding AI and then start, thinking about something more complex. Again, this is something that I think is driven by a lot of AI vendors out there is that, ultimately they have to sell their stuff, right? So they're going to keep on telling you that you need AI. But the truth of the matter is, in a lot of cases, you don't need AI. You grow into needing AI. And that I think is a very important component to think about when you're putting your AI and data strategy together on the marketing side to make sure you don't get, to some extent, bamboozled into buying something that is like 10 scales beyond what you need. And the example here is like a lot of this, like a problem that we see a lot in engineering, right? This is one of the hundreds of data centers that Google has. And when they were designing this, they decided, okay, we'll stop at 4 floors of servers for our hundreds of data centers. That seems like that's the right scale. And so a lot of the things that Google uses for their own products make sense because they are Google. Like they have hundreds of data centers with like 4 stories full of servers to support their product. Unfortunately, most of us are not at that scale. And generally, that means that the tools that they use and the tools that they need are not necessarily the tools that we need. And that's something really important to take into account and figure out, like, what is it that you're trying to accomplish, and just scale out of what you're doing into the next level of complexity. And that can be AI. Um, with that said, I think an important element is figuring out, okay, that makes sense. And like, how do we even identify if what we're talking about is something that AI can solve for?
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. What we'll often teach people is there's two ways to get started. One is a problem-based model, which is you as a marketer, as a marketing leader, have a problem you're trying to solve. Maybe your website traffic is plummeted while you're doubling your investment in content marketing, or your email rates are staying, your open rates are consistent, but conversion rates are plummeting. Like, you have a problem that you can assign a business value to, and you go through your matrix of, here's all the ways we're doing this now. Are there smarter ways to do it? And so you're finding smarter technology. Maybe you don't even need the AI, as Francis is saying. Maybe there's some fundamental other flaw. Maybe it's a talent issue, a quality of content issue, like whatever it may be. But there is a chance that there's new technology or smarter technology that can help you solve this problem in a different way than when you last looked at it 3 years ago. So a problem-based model is one way. What we're going to talk about for the next like 2-3 minutes here is the use case model, which is take a list of all the things you do that are repetitive and data driven. So again, coming up with blog post titles, figuring out which segments to send emails to, figuring out when to send emails, figuring out how to allocate your budget across hundreds of channels. Like, these are things you do all the time. And if you do it enough, then there might be value in finding a tool to do it more intelligently, to automate pieces of that. So again, if you're spending 100 hours a month creating content, and you can cut that to 50 hours and actually produce the same amount or more content at a higher quality, there's a case to be made for finding those smarter tools to help you do that. If it's something you spend 2 hours a month on, and you're going to use AI to now spend an hour and a half, probably not going to be worth your time to invest in that kind of technology and complicate your tech stack, as Francis was saying. You want to just add tools to add tools because it has AI in it. So if we want to jump to the next one, just some very practical things. So we like to talk at kind of this category level because people tend to associate, like, I'm an advertiser, I'm a content marketer, I'm an email marketer. So it helps to look at specific things you can do. So like audience targeting, allocation of budget, developing ad copy. Like, I'll give you, I think one we've tried is copy.ai, and then another one is Jarvis, where you can go in. I think they both have free trials. They both use GPT-3, which is a form of artificial intelligence that generates language. You can give it a prompt, and it'll give you like dozens of potential headlines for your ad copy. You don't have to pick any of them. You have to use any of them, but it's just recommending things. It's an idea sandbox. And so you can use AI in a way where you're not replacing anybody. You're just using it to augment what you're capable of doing. So these are some in advertising. The next one, we get into content marketing. So this is one where we at the AI Institute, if you want to jump, Francis, I think we got the content marketing examples in here. This is one that we use regularly. So we actively use probably a half a dozen AI tools for our content strategy, production, and promotion at the AI Institute, and then even at my agency. And so one of the key ones is figuring out what content to create. We look at the content we already published and figure out ways to republish it and enhance it to improve its potential for optimization and traffic. We use it to generate drafts of entire blog posts. We've recently started doing that with a tool called HyperWrite. So this is an area where we are a media company. We create content for a living. We'll publish probably 150 to 200 articles this coming year. So like 3 to 5 articles a week we'll write. If we can use AI to help us do that more efficiently, absolutely, we're going to try it. So content marketing is an area. You use copy.ai, Market Muse as well, Francis. All right. Yeah. So yeah, Market Muse we're huge fans of. And I think Market Muse is huge fans of MadKudu. I think they're actually the ones that turned us on to you guys back in the day. So content marketing, there are dozens of ways you can use it. And that is a massive war is going on to own language generation. I mean, Microsoft signed a $1 billion licensing deal with OpenAI to license GPT-3 technology. So there are like 300 plus vendors who are built on top of GPT-3. Everybody is trying to have a stake in the language generation game. So that's, if you write content for a living, you will be using AI in some capacity to do pieces of it in the very near future if you aren't already.
Which you probably already are, right? It's like
Yeah.
like WordPress where you have like the SEO scores and like, I mean, any actually blog editing, right? You have those scores, and I think the cool thing is now we're getting to something that's almost like more precise, and it goes kind of beyond like that high level scan.
Yep.
One thing I know you've mentioned this a couple times, but I do recommend everyone here take a couple minutes to go check out what GPT-3 is. I'll add a link in the comments, because I think it is it's like one of those fundamentally transformational libraries that came out recently. And the idea is that it's a bunch of like text predictions in there and like some crazy neural nets in there that are great at generating content. I've used it in like as prototypes, even to generate song lyrics and things like that, where you can say, hey, I want to write a song in the style of Kanye, and I want it to talk about this topic, and it will actually write that. And it's incredible how good it is. I think it's one of those where, again, it's not to the point where, don't imagine that you can fire your content marketers and just like buy this technology, just slap it on, and like, bam, you have content generated every day. You still need someone to go in and, add, I guess, like your like wordsmith and make sure that it's consistent with your brand. But I think in terms of like understanding what resonates, what to talk about, it is an incredible help to get started and build boilerplates and like build summaries of things. So definitely something, again, that takes a bit of the grunt work and allows you to focus on the higher leverage part of creating content.
And for CMOs and marketers, it's a no-code tool like MadKudu. Like
Yeah.
you don't need to be a developer to use these tools. It's literally start a free trial, prompt it with something, and see what it does. Like it just goes.
Yeah,
And then the
that's
last
the
example
beauty of it.
we had email. So again, dozens of use cases for email. This is an area, again, think about the biggest areas of marketing: email, advertising. There's innovation happening. Smarter tools are there. So if you spend a lot of time in email, look at those. And then the last two slides we have here, the first is this visualization of a marketer machine scale. And I find this to be a very important thing for people to consider. We're not saying you're going to go from 0 to full autonomy. That full autonomy doesn't exist in any marketing tool right now. But what we're saying is level 1 might be enough. Like you just want AI to do some aspects of the task or the project for you, and that might make a disproportionate impact on your business, your ability to predict things at scale, your ability to deliver more content, to create things more efficiently. And that's the last slide we have here, is just this idea that you don't need a ton of AI. You just need to apply it at a very targeted level, and it can have this massive impact on your business. And I think that's the key, is you can start with a tool. You don't need to become an expert on AI. You don't ever need to be able to build machine learning models. You don't even have to really be able to explain neural nets to your friends. Like none of that matters. You just have to understand what it's capable of doing. And then the vendors, you have to understand how to assess them and which ones you can trust. And then you just need to integrate AI in very specific ways that have very specific outcomes for your business.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And I guess like kind of the trifecta that I like to leave people with is really think about building like having a strategy that incorporates a data strategy that maximizes data actionability, right? Like data, if you can't access it, is completely irrelevant. It's not useful. Like you have a ton of value in your customer data and your content, like all that stuff that you have is incredibly valuable. Figuring out how to maximize the value out of it should be a critical component of your strategy. The second part, I think, in saying like we were saying, hey, think about rolling out AI in multiple steps. I think like Paul did a great job with like these different phases of like start was like no AI, and then from like mostly marketer to mostly AI. I think a big component of that is figuring out how do you maximize adoption within for users based on what layers you want to use, where you want to use it, and make sure you don't scare people off. And the last thing is, like I think again, incrementally get into it. Like you're not Google, you don't necessarily need AI everywhere. you probably do need it in some places, but keeping it simple is always a good recipe. And so I know there were a couple questions that that came in. I think one of them that I thought was really relevant was we talk a lot about AI as a means to automate a lot of repetitive tasks and potentially low leverage. One of the struggle that I see companies have, and CMOs in particular, is that they're not necessarily close enough to operators to figure out what these repetitive tasks are. So how should a CMO go about either enabling their team to try out AI on specific use cases, and or how do CMO go about testing tools that are out there, like some of the ones you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, again, the way I think about it is the CMOs are often going to be thinking about the macro level goals and problems. They're thinking at that high level. And so what we'll often advise is like literally just go to your VP of marketing, your VP of content marketing, your chief content officer, your head of advertising, whatever those core areas of your marketing strategy are, and ask them, what are you spending the most of the time on? Where is your team spending most time? Where is the most of the inefficiency coming from in repetitive tasks? And then try and see if you can find a tool to do it. Now, again, you can just go through those 3 slides we just talked about and pick, we spent a bunch on content marketing, advertising, email. That's 40% of our budget right there. And start there. Just find a pilot project, like find one way to test it. But I mean, I think like you and I talked about, like a copy.ai, you could have that this afternoon. Like you could literally go in, take your most recent blog post, paste the URL in, and watch it generate 25 recommended tweets. There, you just used AI. You just experimented with a tool that generated something for you. And that each of those experimentations start to teach you a little bit more about what it's capable of. So that to me is like, you just pick a really logical, like get your foot in the water kind of thing, start to realize, demystify it for yourself, realize this is not abstract. It's not too hard for me or my team. And then from there, you can just start stacking those things that can make a difference in your business.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great segue into a question also that Anissa was asking, where she's saying like, how do small businesses find like some of these tools? I think, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but one of the beautiful things about, like we talked a lot about GPT-3 and OpenAI. One of the amazing things, like those tools, like OpenAI is free. I mean, you can license it, you can use it. There's a bunch of tools out there that are actually not that expensive or have free trials. And I do think that actually for small businesses, being able to test and adopt these tools is what's going to give you a competitive edge against a lot of the larger corporations that have a change management process that is so heavy, and like it takes so long for them to adopt anything new, that you can actually be faster to move across the market and go capture customers than they ever will. So I think there's definitely a question of like, where do you find the tools that work for a small company? But I do think that as a small company, adopting tools and testing things as part of your strategy is actually one of the core elements that gives you a competitive edge.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And exactly what you're saying. The larger corporations have red tape. They have processes they have to follow to get these kinds of tools. They have layers of security that they have to get through IT to add things like this. So your nimbleness as a small business is your advantage. And because a lot of this technology is becoming commoditized in some ways, like language generation tools, there's a lot of them to choose from. And so they're coming out to market with entry points that you couldn't touch 2 years ago. So for the free trial or for $49 or $99 a month, you can actually start using a tool like a Hyperwrite or Lately as an example on social media. Like I know is a very low entry point for product. Even MarketMuse recently came out with a much more SMB friendly pricing model. So the tech itself is becoming much more affordable and accessible to small businesses.
Right. And I mean, is it fair to say that the like Marketing AI Institute is actually a good place to go actually to interact with folks and get recommendations? I do think like there's something there of like, I think you're very knowledgeable about like a lot of the different tools that are out there. So it seems like that's a good recommendation also, to go talk to experts
Yeah,
like Paul
that's
to
part of
figure
what we're
out.
doing. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. The vendor spotlights, and then building buyer's guides, and like connecting people with the right tools. Yeah.
Yeah, I think finding communities and people who are fairly vendor agnostic and understand this is really critical, to be able to share, hey, this is our strategy, this is our go to market. What do you think we should implement? Like, what are tools you recommend? And I think folks like Paul actually have amazing recommendations, and definitely worth kind of spending time on out there. Um, so similar, I guess, question from Rama around, again, like for a company that's like in the more in a more traditional market, um, yeah, how do you, I guess, like get to play around with this, test it, and again, like fight the challenge of change management within an organization, where you're just used to doing things the way we always did them.
We see this all the time. My agency, again, we work with healthcare, financial services, manufacturing. Like, we work with tons of traditional industries that aren't the early innovators a lot of times. And so what we always tell people is, again, pick an individual use case. Like, if you're going to use a language generation tool to help you write a blog post, or if you're going to use, an email marketing tool to help you come up with, 10 potential subject lines, pick something that you can do either on your own credit card or on a free trial, prove it works, build a business case for it, and go back and say, hey, look, I did this thing. Like, I was just experimenting and I found a tool that could help us do this. Like, what if we could do this in these 5 areas too? Like, don't try and convince them they need AI. That's never going to get you anywhere. Say, hey, here's this process we used to spend 10 hours per project doing. I got it down to 1. Here's the end product. I used this really cool tool called this. They don't even have to necessarily know it was AI. Like, don't sell them on AI. Sell them on smarter tech, smarter processes that build smarter businesses. Like, that's how you win doing this.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I like that slide that you had. It's like, start with the problem, and like, it doesn't matter how, people don't care about how you solve it. They care about
Yep.
the fact that you solved it. And like, it's problem, return. What's
Yep.
in the middle? Usually
Right.
leadership doesn't really care about that much. I think the other element that I'm excited about, at least in how the market is shaping out, is a lot of the tools out there are going to provide free trials, or like some kind of freemium version, or some way to evaluate. So I think that's a big element of determining, like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What is a good proof of concept? Like, what is an outcome that you feel would prove that there is value in going further? Because the truth is, there's a lot of cases where you're going to identify a good problem, you're going to think you have the right technology to solve it, and for some reason it just might not work, right? There are cases where it just won't work. It's important to quickly get to that point, so that, for every, I would say, like, successful initiative, you should have probably like 9 unsuccessful initiatives. That means that you're iterating enough. And so I think the big element there is just like trying it out, either loading a CSV anonymized or anything, just to prove that, hey, like, I was able to do this thing, which is like the outcome that we're looking for this problem. And therefore, I think we should run a larger pilot of this component. But yeah, change management is always hard. And I think today we are more and more in a getting used to trying things before we buy them. And I think piloting is a big element that can help reduce that hesitancy. And also, just as Paul was saying, don't mention the word AI. Just say, we solved the problem. There's like, I'm very smart, I solved it. Don't tell them that you actually use something else. That I've seen work pretty well. Well, I know we're at time, and yeah, I want to thank you again, Paul, for taking the time today to share a lot of knowledge and some awesome insights around how people should engage with AI. So, if they want to be in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, personally, LinkedIn's great. Just look me up on LinkedIn. And then for the site itself, and for more about technology and use cases, it's just marketingaiinstitute.com.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for joining us today, and thanks everyone for the awesome questions. And feel free to reach out also to MadKudu, either on LinkedIn or to me personally. We're always happy to chat AI and to figure out what could be helpful for you guys. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see a lot of you very soon.
Thanks
Thanks
again.
again.